Prime Minister Allen Chastanet is denying reports that the temporary appointment of 2 independent senators in the upper house on Friday was intended to ram home the enactment of the controversial COVID-19 Prevention and Control Bill. The law supplants the state of emergency which elapsed in September in regulating the public health management of the pandemic. According to the government leader, the 2 senators were merely deputizing for Senators Adrian Auger and Marisha Thomas Francis, who sat out the proceedings citing illness.
At the end of the day, this is no different than a workplace. If you have critical staff members who call in sick, you will find somebody to come and substitute them. I mean, a teacher. There are critical positions that we have, and if somebody falls in sick, you find a substitute. So this is common practice. I mean, even for me as Prime Minister, I've learned that I must always make sure that I have my 5 senators in the House. So if I have a senator who has traveled or a senator that is sick, I simply substitute the person. The same provision is there for the Leader of the Opposition, and the same provision is there for the Governor General.
But critics argue that the substitutes were independent in name only, despite the administration's claims of the appointment being made by the Governor General.
And how do you respond to the concerns that the 2 newly appointed senators might not necessarily be independent, particularly Senator Lee being the head of NCA?
NCA is a statutory agency. In fact, Mrs. Lee has been a person who's been part of civil society for a very long time and has always had a very strong voice, both pro and against government. I mean, at the end of the day, it's encouraged persons who are prepared to speak out and to be independent.
And which civil society organizations were consulted for the appointment of these 2 independent senators?
You'll have to ask the Governor General because it was his appointment.
It should be noted that independent Senator Adrian Auger has made his aversion to the bill very clear, and the absence of the lawmakers was akin to a sick-out in protest over a perceived lack of dialogue and appeals for a deferment. Chastanet is unbothered, expressing resolve to trot on. Thousands took to the streets in an opposition St. Lucia Labour Party protest march to air their grievances with provisions in the COVID-19 bill. Picket signs held aloft articulated dissatisfaction with some of the administration's public policies. But the Prime Minister is unfazed by the opposition's assertions.
I indicated to them that they should have their march and please be safe. I'm glad that for the most part everybody was safe. We live in a very democratic society. But certainly I think the idea that the Labour Party is trying to indicate that my government is not performing, the evidence says to the contrary, that we are in any way trying to be dictatorial, we're not. Fact is that the provisions that we have were done on a collective basis and are working. So we're in that season where everybody believes and trying to guess when the Prime Minister is going to call the elections. They're free to do that. I've heard them give many predictions, and what they say is that if you make enough guesses, you might eventually get it right. So look, there was nothing that I really saw in the march. It was the same old message, one of which does not take into consideration the reality on the ground, and they continue to try to portray a side of St. Lucia that doesn't exist.
Prime Minister Allen Chastanet made his presence felt in the Senate during debate on the COVID-19 Prevention and Control Bill on October 2, 2020. Critics have accused the government leader of putting his thumb on the scale to ensure the bill passed the Senate. However, he claims he was merely providing moral support for new government senator and UWP Dennery North candidate Pharaoh Polius. Winston Springer Jr., HTS News Force.